All right, to help us unpack some of this, we're now joined by Nixon Katembo, who's African Affairs Analyst and one of our colleagues on Channel Africa. Mon frère, bonsoir. It's an interesting time for people in DRC because some might remember him fondly, actually, and others remember him as a dictator.
Very interesting in your opening remarks, Peter. Indeed, Mobutu is remembered fondly in many different aspects of the Congolese political life, including if one have to analyze the current situation in the East and the general state of affairs, as well as the political dynamics within the country, and I don't know whether there is a much to celebrate or the sentiment that perhaps Mobutu was a better devil than the current situation that are prevailing in the country.
So what do people do on a day like today?
Well, on a day like today, indeed, you know, the country has been under dictatorship for over 32 years under Mobutu. And the promise of a better life after Mobutu, the promise of a democratic state, the promise of a better economic and better living conditions for the people of the DRC is what really led the people to usher in the rebel outfit that was led by Laurent Kabila under the AFDEL, alias the Force Democratique, which was their French acronym of the rebel outfit. But soon after, you would see that since he left, the country has been in turmoil. Rather than benefiting the everyday person or the Congolese population now bear the brunt of lawlessness, lack of institutional capacity, and the lack of virtually the absence of the state in many aspects of the way, even though some parts of the country in the West seems to be enjoying a relative calm. But if you ask people in the East, they have a mixed reaction on what they have to celebrate for, especially owing to the wars that have been happening in the eastern part of the country. That's why I have to underscore the point that there are mixed reaction to this day. Although what Kabila came with was really sort of revigorating a sense of patriotic feeling among the population, a sense of nationalism that has been built under Mobutu and the process of the Zaireanization, which called the authenticity, which was started in the early 70s. And I think this is what has kept the country as a unitary state because of that highly inculcated sense of belonging among the Congolese people, despite the diversity and differences within the country.
Help us a little bit with the bit of history. Why was the country called Zaire and the country chose to change the name?
Well, the country was called Zaire and immediately post-independence. You remember it was called the Republique du Congo, which under Lumumba. Then when Mobutu came in, that slowly changed into the Democratic Republic of Congo in the 60s up until the 70s. And then he changed that to what they call a sense of authenticity. In other words, the sense of belonging, that everything should have been named after Africans. Even just being as Peter, Mobutu wouldn't allow that in the Zairean school at the time. You were called by your name, whether you are Dewa Mavinga, for example, in this case, without necessarily calling the name of Peter. So it was that spirit of Africanization that Mobutu changed the country's name to be called Zaire, trying to run away from what he called a colonial past. And changed almost everything, including the cities. For example, the city of Kinshasa was called Leopoldville, which then was changed under the current name. There are cities such as Elizabethville, which is in this case a place like Lubumbashi, then Stanleyville, Kisangani, the third largest city of the country. So it was the whole idea of the colonial project, in this case within Mobutu's frame of mind of thinking. And afterwards, I think when he took over power, remember he was supported by the West, namely the CIA and the Belgian as well as France. So they made him a center of the West in the Central African and East African region, as well as the Southern African region. One should mention that the biggest American embassy in the Sub-Saharan Africa was actually in Kinshasa. And this is, you would recall, in the height of the Cold War, a long history of the assassination of Patrice Lumumba, which Mobutu was instrumental in, even the father of the current president, Etienne Tshisekedi, who was also a close friend of Lumumba, but turned against him after having made this deal with the CIA. So it's quite a complex history, but a long one, which I don't think necessarily we can have in this interview. But in a nutshell, actually, that's what the name Zaire came about.
All right. Manfred, we're going to have to leave it there on this Liberation Day for the DRC. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your insights on this day with us. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.